I would say welcome to the October meeting. Richard has another engagement today, so you're stuck hearing me ramble for the next hour or so. Sorry about that. But there is a break with other presenters, so don't worry about that too much. And we will start off with the land acknowledgement. I believe Jeffrey agreed to do that.
We are, those of you who are here rather than in some other state, are standing and living on the lands of the Kickapoo, Wichita, Tawakoni, Humanas, and Comanche peoples that the Republic of Texas declared a war of extermination and expulsion upon them and chased them from their ancestral lands. But although they've been harmed, they continue to thrive in the process in spite of colonization and white supremacy. And encourage everybody to look into the history of those peoples and even pay some reparations to some of those nations. And that's the end of my acknowledgement.
Thank you.
Jeffrey. So I just put a link to our agenda today into the chat. I'll do that probably again in a little bit as more people come in. Next, I want to cover the community ground rules. I've got, so my camera's over here and I'm looking over here. I'm paying attention to you, I promise, but I'm reading from over here. So sorry about that. So our ground rules for any meeting: make space or take space. Try to limit your comments to 2 minutes each so everybody has time to share what they want to share. Speak from the I perspective instead of generalizing. Practice active listening and seek to understand. Assume good intentions of everybody speaking. Respect one another's space, time, and interest. Be willing to be uncomfortable. Be open to productive discomfort. Understand that intent does not negate impact. Disagree without discord. Personal attacks and labeling have no place in the chapter. And accept that there is no quick fix to the problems we discuss. So with that, we're going to go on to our presentation, which is the Southwestern Medical District Streetscape Project and Other Projects, with a Q&A by Dr. Rose Jones. Dr. Jones has a PhD in medical anthropology from Southern Methodist University and extensive experience in academic and applied research. Dr. Jones has held teaching and research positions at UT Southwestern Medical Center, Parkland Health and Hospital Systems, Children's Health at Dallas, and Southern Methodist University. Her areas of expertise include research strategy, evidence-based solutions, urban disparities, epidemiology, environmental health, community medicine, and pediatric trauma. So, Dr. Jones, are you ready to begin your presentation?
I am. Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Well, okay. I just have to say, just as a preface, that those two introductions, the ground rules and the acknowledgement for Indigenous communities, are probably the best preface and introduction I've ever had in my entire career. So I appreciate that wholeheartedly. I last spoke to your chapter before COVID. Some of you may have been around at that time. At that point, I was at the Perot Science Museum and had been there for 4 years and had just finished up some work looking at disparate views of climate change, working with the Yale spectrum of individuals who fully embraced the concept of climate change and those who did not. It was a really fascinating project. Unfortunately, I published it in a peer-reviewed publication the week before the entire museum industry closed down due to COVID. So I'm not sure how much buzz it got, but I do appreciate that prior to the publication being released, I did speak to your chapter and got some really great insight and feedback that I was able to use for the publication. So for those of you that were here and contributed, I appreciate it. Let me share my screen. And let's see. Can everyone see it? Are we good? Oh,
You cannot yet, no.
okay, let me see what I'm doing wrong. How about now?
Yes.
Okay, so. Is this a good orientation? I can't tell, or should it be in a larger mode? Is
So
this better?
we're seeing right now your presenter mode, so we can see like your notes at the bottom.
Yeah,
If you can present, great. Otherwise, I mean, we can focus in on the middle part of it.
yeah, that's distracting. So let me figure out how to do that.
Can you press like at the very bottom, like the very bottom bar, and then there's like 4 little icons, the one all the way to the right. No, at the bottom. Yeah.
That one?
Yep.
Keep going. Keep
Oh.
going.
This one?
One
Keep
more.
going. That one.
Yes, good.
Yes.
Does that work?
That's it.
Perfect.
Okay, we're good to go. Thank you. So I have created this PowerPoint with really the intention of a discussion. So I'm going to allocate 20 minutes to sort of high level. Here's some concepts. Here's what we're working on, with the intention of leaving about 10 minutes for Q&A and discussion. So Simon, if you could, sometimes I get very passionate or start talking about something and I kind of lose track of time. So if you can help me keep within a 20-minute mark so that I make sure that we have that time allotted for conversation, that would be great.
Absolutely. Also, as a note, when the final agenda came out, you actually had 40 minutes.
Mm.
You got a little bit extra.
Okay, great. Well, we will have a more robust conversation. Okay, the first topic is really just a really quick introduction of Texas Trees. And I want to preface this by saying Texas Trees, as some of you may know, has been around for about 40 years. And I, however, really was not that connected to them and was not familiar with what they were doing. And long story less long, when they began working on the Medical District project, which I'll talk about, they recruited me for this new role that I now have. And I say this because I spent a year basically talking with leadership and telling them, no, I didn't think this was a good fit for me. And I wasn't even sure at that point if I was ready to retire post-COVID. So I say that because my enthusiasm for the organization and the work that we're doing really did sort of come from that context. I was a little bit apathetic about my ability to work in this space and really was not knowledgeable about the full extent of the work that they're doing. And so now I've become quite the convert, as you'll see. So as I mentioned, in fact, we just had our 40th anniversary last week. Texas Trees started really within the space of looking at urban forestry, as probably most people would be familiar, those who know the organization. So the idea was that how can we create green space literally within the Metroplex? And for most of its 40-year career, that was the focus for the organization. Since that time, and quite literally within a really short period of time, I would say the last 4 years, 5 years, the organization has really expanded in terms of staff and programs. The organization 5 or 6 years ago had less than 10 people on staff. We now are over 20. And in addition to the urban forestry, program that we have, they also have what's called a Cool School program. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes, but basically it's a program that's designed to go into DISD communities and redo the entire landscape. One of the things that Texas Trees Foundation funded in 2017 was an urban heat island study. And again, I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But that study showed that not only was Dallas the center for an urban heat island because of its impervious surfaces, lack of tree canopy, all of those things, but it also showed that it had the second worst heat index in the entire country, second to Phoenix. And so it was at that point that Texas Trees said, you know what, this is something within our purview. We can do something about this. The study, the Urban Heat Island Index study, showed that within the space of the Dallas Metroplex, there were 2 hot areas, no pun intended, one of which was the Southwest Medical District, which is ground zero. And again, that's why it's now a project, and I'll talk about the extreme heat in that context. But the other finding from the study was that schools were particularly vulnerable to the extreme heat and to the urban heat island effect. And of course, the reason for that, as I'm sure, even a casual observer can note, is that schools are typically built with cement, asphalt, and very little tree canopy. So they heat up very quickly. So it was because of that that Texas Trees has now expanded to these other two major programs, again, Cool Schools and Southwest Medical District. We are also in the process of launching two other programs that are kind of hot off the press, if you will, one of which I was specifically recruited to work on, and I'll talk about, it's called the Nature Lab. And the second is a program that's going to be dedicated toward workforce, where we're going to be recruiting at-risk teens mostly, bring them into a curriculum and setting, and then over the course of 6 months, training them specifically to be working in the context of urban green space and planting trees. So we're really excited about that growth and the way that we're expanding. Okay, one of the things that I was asked to talk about are the benefits of trees. So that's where I'll start. We know, and it's it's become a soapbox for me in some ways. Again, I'll talk about this in a few minutes. But what we know is that there's an undeniable, unequivocal impact from exposure to nature, including trees, and health, human health and ecosystems health. And we know that because we have decades of empirically sound research and centuries of indigenous knowledge that support this correlation. We now know, again, definitively, that things that are quite diverse in terms of how we define human health, depression, mental illness, diabetes, ADHD, a whole range of different oncology. We recover quicker from surgery when exposed to biophilia in nature. Birth outcomes are significantly, in fact, we've got something coming out soon. One of my colleagues at UT Southwestern looking at air quality in vulnerable communities in South Dallas. And, it's linked to low birth weight and to early delivery. So the list goes on, respiratory conditions, cardiovascular. We know that there's this clear link. For me, it's almost become, and I'll talk about this in a few minutes as well, it's really become a question of continuing to argue that the earth is round when in fact we already know that and need to move forward. So that's part of what we're doing with our new health initiative on the Nature Lab. We also know that in addition to human health, that trees and nature have a strong correlation to economy. And I mention this because, Texas Trees has been doing this for a long time, and I've been working in the space of public health for a long time. So one of the takeaway lessons is that the message that you have has to be relevant to those that are hearing it. So sometimes, in spite of what would seem, pretty easy to convince individuals, is that, hey, we've got community and public health that really do benefit from green space. Sometimes it's the economic argument. And so I offer that just in terms of understanding that the messaging really that we do is really designed to be very broad, including policy change. So typically, economy is one of the ways in which we're successful with stakeholders in that context. And the other thing I just want to mention is that they say there's always a silver lining. And in the case of COVID, there was really a green lining, because what we saw with the shutdown was that parks and open space not only became valuable, but we saw larger quantities of people, demographics moving into the space, appreciating and understanding it. The other thing that we saw is when things shut down quite literally and traffic went away, we can look at areas. I'm still waiting to see. I don't think that we've exploited the data to the extent that we can, but it's very clear with the shutdown that air quality improved without all this driving. And so I like to mention that I think COVID had a really strong positive impact for some of the work that we're doing with green space and nature. And the other thing, just as a quick footnote, especially because I'm working in the medical district, is that it's also exposure to nature is also quite an anecdote to medical fatigue and burnout, which I think is important because I'm starting to see funding being released by the federal government to encourage looking specifically at the dyad between nature and medical burnout. So I think that's a positive, again, a green lining from my perspective. So here's my soapbox. One of the things that is somewhat frustrating is that this knowledge, this information, this data that I've just shared is not new. It didn't just come on the scene. We've known it for quite a while. And so one of the things that I think has been very interesting to begin to move out of this context is the notion that, you know, we've got a solid database, we've got lots of data. What do we need to do? How do we move the dial? And so this was really important. It took me a little bit of time to convince my leadership that we needed to embrace this ethos, because in the first few months that I was at Texas Trees, a lot of my job was dedicated toward documenting the benefits of nature, documenting the benefits of trees. And what I found myself quickly getting into was this notion of, we've got the data, we need a next step. And so you'll see some of our work is really dedicated to doing that. Okay, the Southwest Medical District project. This is a really interesting project for a lot of ways and a lot of reasons, rather, not just for Dallas, but I think for the way in which TTF has approached it. We've tried to be really thoughtful. We've tried to be very innovative using state-of-the-art methodological equipment to measure and capture the data that we're going to use to inform trees. And we've also, and this has really been the sort of the launching pad for us to begin to move into a stronger advocacy role. So I'll talk about that with the Nature Lab. Let's look at the medical district. So it's a huge area, and it's a really bustling. It's about 3 miles, as those of you who are not located in Dallas, 3 miles outside of Dallas, outside of the city. It's a premier medical institution, and it's a mess. It's got a 7% tree canopy, which makes it, just for context, the environmental tree people tell us that we need at least 40% tree canopy to really make an impact on extreme heat. And Dallas overall as a city has a 28% tree canopy. And again, in the Southwest Medical District where we're working, only 7% tree canopy. So it's an extreme heat island effect, in spite of the fact that it's the bastion for, you know, health, public health, community health, and for, you know, premier medical, for most of the work that it does, research and patient advocacy. So what we have been capitalizing on in terms of promoting revisioning and restoring the landscape within the Southwest Medical District is this science that we have that definitively shows how high the temperature gets within this area compared to surrounding areas, rural areas, and suburban. And it's really provided us that empirical framework, really provided us with a context for getting better buy-in. So we began to use this sense of empiricism and data to drive all of the work that we're doing. So here's a concrete example that appears to resonate with some of our policymakers and stakeholders at high levels. So we know, here's an example of a bus depot similar to what we have that DART has in the Southwest Medical District. And what you'll see is that even within the geographical space of a meter or less, much less in some cases, you can see that there's quite a variability in terms of heat, whether it's in the sun, how is the wind moving, is there a tree canopy nearby, what type of building material was used, is it asphalt, is it permeable? So within this very small, again, space, we find remarkable changes in terms of just what the temperature is. And a couple of things are significant about that. One is how we're leveraging that information and applying it to how we're redoing the Southwest Medical District. But the other thing, and I think it's an important point, it sometimes gets, I don't know, not quite the attention I think that it needs, is that this context for understanding variability in small spaces for, in this case, extreme temperature, is not typically something that the community or general public is aware of. Typically, they understand that whatever is being reported on the news by the meteorologist, it's 107 today, for example, can in fact be very different depending on where you're living and what your conditions are. So we think that this is a really important public messaging that needs to continue to grow so that we can continue to breed awareness so that we can have activism for change. So what we envision in the medical district, and I should say this project's been going on since 2017, probably 2018, is been long before I came on board, remarkably complex in terms of all of the players. Of course, all three medical, UT Southwestern, Parkland, Children's, as well as City of Dallas, DART, the list goes on, are really stakeholders for this project. What we anticipate is taking that space along Harry Hines, which is indicated in green on the map, and literally transforming it so that it becomes, the tree canopy is enveloped so that we can have bike and pedestrian safety. It's a mess right now, and it has been for a long time. And we're also committed to making sure that that environment, the extreme heat, the air quality that goes with it, and thermal comfort, how it is for people to walk around and experience, are going to change as well. The interior, where you see that circle, the dark green circle, we propose to make into a park. And that, for those of you in the Dallas area, you know that that's the area where you have by Inwood and Harry Hines, where you have sort of that circular mess, where there's traffic being directed. What we're planning to do, the design calls for converting that into a huge green space and having the cars go underneath that bypass. So this is sort of our long-term vision, and this is what we have been working for the last several years with these various entities to accomplish, which includes fundraising. TTF has been working very hard to bring in grants and to bring in private funding that will help support this effort. And we're super pleased to announce that we're ready to start on design. It will begin at the east part of the corridor, and we just put out an RFP. We've invited 6 landscape designers to meet with us to present their approach, and so we're ready to move forward. So it's very exciting. What is unique about the project, outside of the fact, and I guess one of the point warrants, just for context, is that that whole corridor along Harry Hines is just hostile to human engagement, to the ecosystem in general. And I think one of the contexts for appreciating that is that it was an area that really was developed in Dallas in the 40s. And it was developed specifically to be on the periphery of the city and to be an industrial freight zone. And in fact, that's what it still looks like. So when you find there's no sidewalks for patients or providers to walk, it's almost shocking. And then when you factor in traffic and the noise and the pollution, it's overwhelming. But again, it goes back to how it was originally developed. So back to what we're doing in terms of innovation. So what TTF decided was, okay, this is an area that needs to be transformed. We think it's within our wheelhouse to be able to do that. So they moved forward to begin this dialogue and where we are today with design. But the other thing that they did was they said, TTF leadership said, you know what, let's go beyond even that. Let's take advantage of this burgeoning science to begin to understand the microclimatic environment in which we're working so that it can be used to guide the decisions that we're going to be making with the landscape transformation. So we know, for example, that typically when engineers go in, and bioengineers and landscape architects, to modify an environment, and in this case, landscape, typically what they do is they use satellite imagery to be able to identify hotspots and important pieces of data. But as I showed you in the previous slide, we know that that can range enormously within various eco niches. So one of the things we wanted to do is to begin to collect real data in real time so that that could then be used in conjunction with the satellite data to inform the design. What this will tell us is, for example, what types of trees do we need that are going to be most adept at, helping to provide thermal comfort in the winter and in the summer. We have to look at pollution. We have to look at where they're strategically placed, how far. We know that the further they are from the right of way, the implications are for thermal help in air quality. So what we've done is we have partnered with a bioengineering firm they're in Oakland, I believe. And we have been working with them to develop a system where we can capture this data that will then be used to create optimal simulations for the corridor that we will then use to construct what is going to be ultimately the transformation. So it's pretty exciting. This is a photo of some of the equipment that we have. We are in the process of finalizing with Parkland the agreement that we need to place a communication hub on top of their roof. It's the highest roof within the Southwest Medical District corridor, and all of our meteorological equipment is sight for view. So we need to have the communication hub that's going to receive this data positioned again in the tallest area, and that happens to be Parkland's rooftop. So we're close, but there's still some issues that we need to resolve with the fire marshal. So what we decided to do as we waited for this to go through was we did a pilot study. And those of you with backgrounds in research know that that's a really important part of a research process, which is the ability to make sure our equipment's working. We used it to write algorithms. We used it to test a couple of hypotheses that you see here. So our new office, for those of you that don't know, Texas Trees moved from its old established, I think since the 80s or maybe the 90s. I don't know that history well enough. They have been in the area right behind Baylor and the Swiss, where all the nonprofits were located, these beautiful homes and gorgeous trees. And we just outgrew the space. So in June, we joined the water cooler, which is at the Pegasus building off of 35. And so what we did this summer, as we waited for Parkland to give us permission to set up the hub, is we took this equipment and we installed it. And so, in fact, we installed it on the day that it was 107. It was me and one of our bioscientists from Berkeley. On the left, what you see is a globe. It's we fabricated that, and it's capturing mean radiant temperature. So there are temperature sensors on the outside. You can see one of them dangling. And what that allows us to do is, in addition to just capturing heat data, it's also allowing us to capture data on humidity under different types of conditions. And then I guess you can't really see it that well. These may not be the most optimal pictures. I think he chose these because this shows we have some of this equipment is in, the parking lot on these poles all the way to the left. Some of the equipment we placed in the middle shows what I'm calling the mother tree, these established oaks. And then the other one are these little tiny trees that is very typical when developers move in. And what we've been looking at is, what kind of impact does this have? And basically just the preliminary data shows that these little small scrawny trees don't do much. So in addition to temperature, we also are capturing data on light sensor. We've got light sensors up. We've got, we're capturing wind data, et cetera. So that may be a lot on, I get carried away when I start talking about the microclimatic data. Okay, so let's move to the Nature Lab. So the other, and at the risk of being presumption, and I'm somewhat biased because this is what Texas Trees hired me to do. So in addition to developing an approach to the Southwest Medical District transformation with the landscape redesign, and really positioning it within the context of empirical science and data, it was also decided that we needed to have an approach to the project that was going to move the dial on this eco paradigm. And so this is where the Nature Lab comes in. And I will say what I'm about to share with you, we have not yet released to the public. We are still in the early phases of putting this together. I've been on board for 8 months. And so during this time, I've been working, I have two roles rather within the organization. One is to oversee the meteorological data that you just saw, to make sure that the way in which our contractors are approaching it, including the landscapers, is in a way that's empirical so that we can get peer review publications out of it, because we know that some of our audience and stakeholders, that's going to resonate the best with them. The other part of my job is to develop an initiative, which again, we're calling the Nature Lab, that's going to allow us to swing, what I call swing the eco paradigm. So let me just kind of walk you through, knowing that it's a burgeoning initiative. The context for this, and I think it does warrant some conversation, is that and I think this was really very, very astute of our CEO. I can't take any credit, but what she recognized was we've now invested, and by the time this project on Harry Hines is completed, this is at least a 10-year project. And what she didn't want to have happen, and what typically happens when landscapers come in, even at this magnitude and the scaling, is that it's a check off, we're done. So the directive she gave me was, I want you embedded in the Southwest Medical District project, and I want you to create an initiative that's going to make sure that it's not a one-off, that it's not check the box and we're done. So that's really what we are attempting to do. And so from that directive and from the context of the work I just described from the Southwest Medical District, our goal is exceedingly, I would say exceedingly, not just challenging, but very optimistic, positive, because we really are, our goal is to transform, and not just from a research perspective and a methodological perspective, but also from a social advocacy and impact perspective. So what is the Nature Lab? Okay, so basically the concept is that we're using the metaphor of a human-centered ecosystem to bring together diverse stakeholders and audiences in a way that will be collaborative, that will be embedded in creating, sharing, and consuming environmental science education and making policy changes. So within that context, what we've done is we've created a series of initiatives that will emanate from the Nature Lab. And they really are designed, this is a work in progress. We're going to, be ready as we prepare to launch. We will be soliciting feedback from multiple communities and partners, we hope. But right now, what we have is kind of the notion of how do we leverage diverse talents, diverse interests, diverse passions for this one sort of unifying goal, which is let's transform urban public heat and climate, because we know we got air quality issues, in a way that really does go beyond asking the same questions and reporting the same reiterative information about how important the climate is. So what we have is we're hoping to bring in, to put together a series of chats, and that would be like ground level, boots on the ground conversations like we're having with you. It would also be it could be grand rounds at the medical district as they get ready to open up their new school of public health. It can be school focused, but the idea is how do we leverage and put together curriculum and talking points that will begin to provide this messaging. And then you can see, I'm not going to go through the whole list with you, but social media, how do we wrap it around, publications, how do we wrap it around, if art is your boat, how do we get funders involved? The one thing I will point out is within this context, what we're focusing on at this point is what we're calling Nat Lab scientists. What we have found is that we need to, since we have limited funding, I'm working on an NIH grant right now, we do have public money, private money rather. What we want to do is we need some boots on the ground workers to help us with things like trying to capture temperature in real time so that we can then share it and begin to work on this consciousness. And we also have some really interesting projects within the medical district, one of which surrounds ornithology. We've got air quality issues. So what we're hoping to do is to create a curriculum and a model that's based partly on public health, where they use a paradigm called train the trainer, with the other that I'm sure most of you are familiar with, the citizen scientist. So we want to bring those two paradigms together to create something that's very unique to environment public health. So where we are with the Nature Lab is I recently finalized a call to action, We are now actively in the process of recruiting members to sit on a steering committee with the idea of helping us understand, and probably most of this will be related to funding. So trying to get stakeholders who are not only engaged, but can help us strategize in terms of how we effectively, cohesively, and quickly mobilize this in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We are also working on Change the Narrative, which is most of what I'm doing in that context is working on publications and op-eds. I've got something out for review right now. And of course, as I mentioned, public education. And for policy change, we really see that as an opportunity to begin working within communities to teach community members the advocacy of environmental health. So with that, I will end with my favorite quote, I guess, as an anthropologist. But I end with this quote because oftentimes when I talk about this topic and the work that we're doing, I often encounter naysayers who say, well, that's a pretty ambitious goal. And the truth of the matter is, it truly is. And I am a glass always filled kind of person. And I believe in this sentiment, which is never doubt that a small, thoughtful group of citizens can change the world, because that's what has always happened in the past. So with that in mind, how did I do on time, Simon?
Absolutely perfectly. That was 30 minutes.
Yay. Okay, good. So yeah, that's kind of what I prepared, and I'm happy to answer questions and have any kind of conversation. Okay, you have to help me get out of this so I can see everybody. Let's see.
So I think at the top you should have something you can click to end sharing.
And okay, that's what I'm looking for. Y'all can start. You can ask questions. I'm sorry, I'm a little technologically challenged. I see new share. Let me see. I don't see that. Let me look under more.
Sorry, I can. There you go.
Oh, okay.
Turns out I had that option. Okay, so we have questions. We have questions in chat. We have question hands up. I'm gonna start from the chat. The first question I saw was from James at 10:29. Those of you who have your hands up, please keep your hands up. James asks, if not covered, is the medical district plan covered by any of the Dallas PUD plus plans?
I'm not sure. Can you elaborate?
James's iPhone, can you unmute and elaborate?
The Dallas Planning and Urban Development Department has a number of area plans, and I can't even keep up with all of them.
And nor can I. I don't know the answer to that question. But if you email me, I'm happy to find that answer for you and get back to you.
All right, and James also had a question about, regarding the sensors, any comments on communications and data display technology, and whether there's a possibility of adding air quality particulate monitoring compatible with the City of Dallas, shared air DFW, off the shelf purple air, etc.
So that's a complicated question. So I'll answer this. We do not currently have any air quality monitors in the Pegasus pilot, and we didn't anticipate because this is intended to be transitory. We do intend to assess air quality once the formal study launches, which is imminent. We are still in conversation with multiple entities about which monitors to use for which purpose. And, there are budget issues as well. And so the answer to, there are several options that have come up, one of which I spent last week with David Larry in his innovation lab looking at the really wonderful air quality monitors that he and his students have fabricated. And we also have been in communication with some mobile units that would allow us to have higher quality than the purples, and we could theoretically drive them around the area at very specific intervals for the protocol that may also either supplement or enrich our base. So We do anticipate expanding not just air quality, but also all of the sensors that we have. The sensors are designed to spit back data every 20 minutes. Pegasus Park, we have about 15. I'm sorry if my dog is barking. And so, yeah, so that's what I know about air quality. And we are working with the city of Dallas. They had the Breathe Easy program. There were sensors that were used within that context. So we're talking to multiple people at multiple options, but have yet pegged down the protocol for when we make the transition.
Thank you. Next question, we're going to turn to climate refugee Mickey Lynn.
Hey, first, congratulations on doing this. It's the data that begins to drive out the bad behavior. And I hope this gets well publicized and people understand the implications. Second, a suggestion. I think the community solutions need to be a big part of what you're doing. And the solutions exist. And a lot of these solutions are in very poor landscaping practices. We use way too many pesticides. You talked about these areas that don't have concrete sidewalks. Thank goodness. Why aren't we using the European approach where you just put gravel down instead of impervious concrete? But one thing I want to also mention is in the schools, Dallas should never build a school with a heat pump air conditioner again. People don't understand how heat pumps work. Heat pumps dump heat, and I can explain it offline if people want to know it, but they get more inefficient as it gets hotter. You already were showing 127 degrees Fahrenheit, and in an urban heat center, it's 15 degrees more. You basically can't create enough electricity to cool Dallas with air conditioners, traditional heat pump. They ought to all be geothermal, and we can show them schools that were designed that way. People in the old days didn't understand how to do it. They would overheat because they try to dump heat all summer long in an air conditioning environment into a loop, and they overheat the loop. Well, the simple answer, you throw that heat off in the winter, you cool the loop at night when it's much more efficient and take that heat out of the urban heat environment. So there's a lot that needs to be attached to what you're doing, not using gasoline blowers, right? Going to electric. There's just a whole lot that needs to be attached as solutions. Thank you.
I appreciate your comments and I agree wholeheartedly, which is why, as you'll see, we have multiple initiatives. This is not something that one organization or entity is going to be able to tackle on its own. Our goal is to sort of move in that direction. So I appreciate your comments and let me know if you want to help.
Well, one final comment. A lot of those solutions are in the Climate Boot Camp. And if you want a curriculum to address those solutions, let us know offline and we can link you to a curriculum to that.
Thank you. I heard that at the very beginning. So I had already written that down. I will follow up with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Rebecca.
Hi, yes, I was just going to ask, did you share your contact information, Rose?
I did not, but I can.
Maybe just your email in the chat, because I
Yep.
just want to email you about, you said something about op-ed and I just wanted to contact you about that.
Excellent. I will do that. Thank you.
Next, John Quinn.
Hi, Rose.
Hi.
I'm very excited about what you're doing. The folks in the medical center, I was a project manager at DART way before you were in there with this thing. And, you know, we pointed all the same things out to the medical center people, but they were just not very, they just didn't want to do it. I'll just put it that way. So I applaud the fact that bigger people than us are now getting on board and influencing what's going on there. The placement of the DART station is in the wrong location. That takes up way too much energy with all the shuttles that go on, but it seems to work. I also feel that there needs to be much more cooling to the backside around the DART station and the parking lots on that northern side. again, I mean, this all comes down to people just putting input, and also you getting much more data, which, that's the good thing. I mean, to me, a lot of this data collection is great, and it's just common sense.
Mhm.
But I talked to Nick Coletti. He gave my Rotary Club a presentation. There is funds there. I'd like to do the $2,500 or $25,000 50 tree initiative at one of the schools, or maybe a few schools. I'd like to get some Rotary clubs together and go after called a district grant, and there is money
Mhm.
there that we tap. Also, I'm a member of what's called Environmental Sustainability Rotary Action Group, and that's an international group. I believe there's money there, and you don't think of the United States as a needy place, because we are rich in many ways and very wasteful. But in terms of trees, I wonder if we could go after an international grant and get with a few of the bigger Rotary clubs like downtown and Park Cities and put together a grant. And I'm sorry, I met the young woman with that Nick brought with her, and she's a grant writer.
Alex?
Yeah, I think it was Alex.
Mhm.
So she'd be great to help me together, if that's all right. Who knows how much money we could get. And this, Rotary would be private funds. It wouldn't be
Mhm.
government funding. But do you know Don Rains?
No, I don't.
He's a
No.
landscape architect, and he's all into this, like, let's don't put curbs on streets because when it rains, the water washes up onto the
Mhm.
roof and stuff like that. I mean, just common sense stuff that we've kind of lost our ability to think, and finding out that the medical city is that hot, and we're number 2. Holy cow. I mean,
Right.
that gives us a lot of initiative. I wish there was more money with the climate reality that we could throw some more money in, but
You have other talents and skills. I appreciate your comments, John. I really do. And I think, to your point, I think that, I worked in the medical district as a professor and as a research scientist for 20 years. And I agree with you. There has always been sort of this apathy. But the one thing that I think has really been, I've seen the dial move forward, has really been on research, right? And putting it within that context. So I appreciate that. And, it's my hope that we're going to continue to, if we can push in a really strong, aggressive way beyond, what you say, common sense, then maybe we'll be able to make some change. So thank you.
I do want to ask, steering committee wise, would you be interested? Could I put steering committee?
Sorry.
I mean, I've kind of got, how often are you?
I'm sorry.
How often were your steering committee?
I'm sorry, let me clarify. We wrote the call to action for the Nature Lab and now are in the process of beginning to recruit for the steering committee. So we have not yet launched.
Well, I would like to throw my card in.
Awesome. And I've put my email in the chat.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And Jayashri, you have your hand up. You are muted.
Hi, Rose. It was a wonderful presentation, and I have been following you guys on the web. I love your work then because I used to live in Medical District Drive, so I know what you're talking about. My main question is, can you give me, because I do nowadays work on health concerns regarding these nature and its effect on health, and negative, both positive. So you had a slide with beautiful examples of the benefits. Do you have the sources from where you got those? I'd love to get that.
Yes, if you email me, I have
I
a
did.
separate PowerPoint. I can't promise it has every single one of those, but it has a cumulative that I've been putting together. So I'll share with you the PowerPoint that I have for that. I'm happy to do that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Of
That's all.
course.
Good morning. How you doing?
Good morning.
My name is Olympia Green, and I live in North Dallas now. And one of the concerns that I have is what we call shade tree apartheid. And I don't know if you've heard that term. And for those that may not know, is that when one part of the city, maybe the southern sector of the city, trees are cut down and the temperature goes up more so, and because there's more concrete. What is your opinion on that? And if you talk about the health benefit of trees, what is the downside of not having trees in those communities? If you can comment on that.
So I'm not familiar. I'm familiar with the concept of Lincoln that you're describing, but I haven't heard that terminology. What do you call it? The apartheid part? You're kind of breaking up.
It's called shade tree apartheid.
Shade
Is
tree? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. It's where you go into like South Dallas or you go into Southern Oak Cliff,
Uh-huh.
that's trees. They
Right.
cut down trees and all you have is like barren fields. As versus when you come out here to North Dallas off Park Lane, you have so many different trees, you have so
Yes.
many shrubberies. And I was asking about what is the downside of not having that type of shade covering in a community?
Quite,
Because
yeah.
that's about the
Right.
benefit.
Quite significant is the downside, right? And the answer is that we know that tree canopy, extreme heat, all these climate changes are very specific to vulnerable communities and marginalized communities. These are equity issues. It's about environmental justice. And I'm proud to say that Texas Trees will have, we did the urban heat study in 2017, and we are in press right now with a big study that's on tree equity in Dallas. So I'm really very proud of that and excited. So I think we'll be able to demonstrate that in a really empirical framework. So that should be out soon within the next couple of months. But to your point, yeah, this needs to be part of the conversation. And it's not just, trees and extreme heat, it's air quality. So yeah, and that's why I think part of our agenda is, there's definitely public education, there's fundraising, but there really does need to be social advocacy to change policies.
And I would be willing to work with you on that, because I've been talking about it for a minute about how that affects, because we did a study about 3 years ago, and this is dealing with DART and not having adequate bus stops in 25 different areas inside and Pleasant Grove. And when we went to them, we found out that there was no bus stop in these areas, and there was no shade. So people that were having to catch transit, they had to stand out in the cold, they had to stand out in the heat, on concrete or in a barren field where there was no shade. And we took this finding to DART. We took the finding to DART, and they gave us one concrete bench in the middle of Texas heat. And what we did, we demonstrated, we took a bucket that somebody had found and was sitting on this bucket at the bus stop. And we said, this is our bus stop. So I really willing to work with you, get that community information out, because we definitely do need it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, so my email is in the chat, so please follow up with me.
Okay, thank you so much.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. We are a little bit over time, but it's a great conversation, so I'm hesitant to wrap it up. I do want to add just like one question for you, Dr. Jones, real quick. Trees are great. We love trees, wonderful about trees. I do understand there are probably some paved surfaces that probably need to remain clear. Taking maybe like a helicopter, for example. Has there been any conversation about ultra reflective surfaces?
The answer is most likely, but not within my context. So I would imagine that those are conversations that our design team has had. But that's
Okay.
all I can speak about that. But again, Simon, this is really outside of my purview and expertise. If you send me a question, I'm happy to follow up with my colleagues.
Okay.
I really don't want to misspeak, but I would imagine, I've been super impressed with the holistic way in which the designers have had this conversation and approached it. But I don't know the answer to that question specifically.
Fair enough. I did just put a link into the chat. There is a product. I'm not seeing it. I'm just like talking about it.
I see.
It's a very high reflective paint. I've put this on the outside of my house. It makes a dramatic difference.
You know,
Like-
now that I'm thinking about, yes, I'm a little bit familiar. I've seen this really be effectively used in California. I think there've been some pilot studies. Yes, I'm familiar with it. But yeah, I appreciate that. I should do more, a deeper dive. I think, you know, and that's another one of those things, solutions and approaches that really can benefit the community but needs to be part of that messaging and the way that we, you know, rally behind it. But thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I think we all got a lot of really good information out of it.
Awesome. If you want to help, keep us in mind. I thought your ideas were really great. I knew this would be a good organization for us. So I do appreciate all of you, and I look forward to hearing from some of you soon. Take care.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rose.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so we'll go on to work group updates now. So first one is regarding the creatives. They're going to meet on Thursday, October 20th at 6:30 p.m. And their theme this month is Harvest. There will not be meetings in November or December. So the last meeting for the creatives group will be Thursday, for the year, will be Thursday, October 20th, 6:30 p.m. And then letters to the editor for the upcoming election. So Amy Hunt, now we are bipartisan. We are not taking any sides politically. However, Amy Hunt has created a document where she is highlighting, I think it's 3 positions that don't typically get a lot of attention, but are very important for climate action. I'm providing a link to her right up here. She's also encouraging members to send letters to editors, not as climate reality, just as citizens of Dallas and Fort Worth, talking about the importance of climate action in these roles. Specifically, she's talking about the Railroad Commissioner, the Land Commissioner, the Agricultural Commissioner, and the Texas Comptroller. So there are actually 4. Railroad Commissioner deals with oil and gas, not railroads. Like a lot of these these titles are misleading. You might read them and think, oh, that has hardly anything to do with the climate crisis. But in fact, they do. So if you go to this document, she has provided a breakdown of what each position does. And she has also provided links to the candidates, all candidates running for each position. So please write about these. If you feel that writing is something within your purview, send these letters in. Again, not advocating climate reality, just saying I care about these items. I'm going to turn it over now to Jayashri to talk about book club.
Thank you, Simon. I just wanted to take this opportunity to inform all the members that even though you have not officially signed up for our book club, you are welcome to attend it even though you have not read. Also, we are welcoming suggestions for our next year discussions. So please feel free to email me or text me however you want. Any book on anything that you think is related with things that we discuss, talk, or are concerned with. It doesn't have to be only climate science. Fiction or non-fiction, anything is welcome. And the next book we are reading is called Another Now. It's a non-fiction by Yanis Varoufakis, who was the finance minister of Greece. And he has done several books, wonderful writer. So I encourage all of you to read it just for the information. It's a very positive, very slim book. Shouldn't take you more than a week to read it. So that's what my 2 cents are. Thanks, Simon. Any questions?
Yes, I have a question. I just commented that I picked up the book, but I picked up a different book, the one that Roger recommended. Do we have two different book clubs going?
Yeah, so Roger does one that is to get new members engaged. And it's not exactly two different book club, like officially there's that quarterly that we meet, but Roger does one that is monthly, and I have not been able to join it because I'm slow reader and I am not able to keep up with my 3 book clubs, but I would love to read those books, and I'm going to ask Roger to send me a list of all the books he has suggested so far so that I can include that in our formal choice for the next year for the book
Okay.
club itself.
Got
So
it.
for this book is Another Now, and it's on our book club sites. You can find it there, Rebecca.
Okay, I'm with you. I'm a slow reader, so I'm like one book a quarter kind of
So,
person too.
yeah, that's my problem.
All right, and Mickey Lynn would like to provide some information about the next climate boot camp coming up.
We'll be showing it starting in November 7th, I believe it is, and it's out posted on the hub. And you can also just go directly to www.ecoactus.org to register. So if you haven't seen it, or if you want to invite friends, or you want to bring a university, or hey, we'd like to get Rotary in on that too. Also, there will be a showing of Deep in the Heart, which is a stunning documentary about wildlife in Texas. It'll be a joint showing with the SMU at SMU, but it'll be in this first quarter of next year. So just pencil that in on your calendar to be watching for it, because it'll be free and it'll be well worth seeing.
All right, so real quick, I want to talk about elections. It is the end of the year, and we are, next month, we're going to be presenting everybody who's running. If you have not stepped up to run and you think that you could offer something to the chapter in one of our executive committee roles, I encourage you to consider reaching out. A little bit of information on that. So you're not running a campaign. It's not anything where you have to do a lot of logistics going into this. And historically, honestly, nobody has ever run against anybody. Anytime we've had multiple people interested in a specific role, they have co-chaired that. And that works very, very well because of the size of our chapter and the diversity with of all of our members and our interests. So specifically, we need somebody to serve on as our membership chair. This is somebody who would engage new members and work on really just making sure that people are active in the chapter, especially new members coming in. They might be overwhelmed with all of the opportunities for activism, or they might have a specific idea and need to be connected with somebody. We are looking for somebody to serve with Richard as events co-chair. It's just planning events, organizing that. It's pretty straightforward. And then we have a special position that we need ideally now, which is the transition administrator. Typically, this would be called the elections administrator. The entire time I've been with the chapter, as I said, the election has basically amounted to, this is the panel of people who are running for executive committee, and then we vote in favor or against. Nobody has ever voted against. So rather than saying elections administrator, and then we have to come back and say nobody ran against each other, transition. We're looking for a transition administrator, just somebody to keep the whole process honest. If you're interested in that, not much work that's going to go into it. Just keeping track of everybody that's running, everybody that's incumbent, presenting that to the chapter next month. Very quick and easy. So if anybody is interested in serving as the transition administrator, the membership chair, or the events co-chair, please contact me. We would love to have you on the team. It does not matter how new you are. I was with the chapter, I think 2 months before Roger tapped me for co-vice chair. There's not a process. You don't have to be any specific position before the next one, with the exception of co-vice chair into chair. Please consider running. We could use as many diverse views as we can possibly get. Now, November 12th, we still need to finalize a few details on this, but we're looking at having a chapter birthday party at Plano Environmental Education Center. This is going to be a potluck event. The chapter is turning 5. It's turning 5, and it's a thriving chapter. It is the largest in Texas, one of the largest chapters in the entire nation. Everybody has done a lot of really impressive work to get us here, and we want to celebrate that. So November 12th, go ahead and pencil it in. There'll be more information coming up once we finalize a couple of the details, but it's going to be a potluck, and we're going to have a really, really good time. With that, I'm going to turn over to community building with Jeffrey.
One thing more, Simon. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I thought Alex was organizing the showing of the same movie that Michael talked about.
Yes,
Is
so
that not?
we're looking at that in December. We have to finalize a few things before we throw out the advertisement. But yes, we're looking to create a private screening for chapter members of the same film. This would not be with another organization, it would just be us. So we're still working on that. I actually gotta send out some documents related to that today. That's gonna be cool. Like when we get it done, it's gonna be cool. So look for that beginning of December.
All right, community building. First, I have 2 quick announcements. One is that Leah will be doing our this month's yoga next Saturday and moving it back to its original time of 11 o'clock Central. Since she's going to be doing it from the West Coast, it helps her with her schedule. So everybody is welcome. You don't have to be an experienced yoga person. You can work with it as you want to. So that's next Saturday at 11, and the Zoom will be on the calendar and elsewhere. Secondly, the community building is starting to plan with the new Fort Worth Tarrant County group to do an in-person meeting. Date still to be settled on, but we're working community building and the Fort Worth side of things to have an in-person get together. And then finally, just there's been a lot covered in this meeting that get everybody refocused and re-energized. I'd like everybody to sort of settle down, settle into their bodies. If you want to, if you're not driving in a car, you can shut your eyes. Take a really deep breath, and as you exhale, feel a wave go down through your body to your feet and to the ground, connecting you to the earth. Take another deep breath. And another exhale, connecting you to the earth. And as you continue to breathe, think of a place in nature where you've experienced joy and happiness in the past. And picture yourself sitting in that place in nature. And feel the breeze, feel the temperature. The sounds. And know that this memory that you have of this place where you felt joy and happiness in nature is always there for you. And I encourage you to microdose every day by taking a moment to return to this space and feel that joy and happiness in nature. Then take a couple of deeper breaths. When you're ready, you can just open your eyes again. And thank you all for coming to the meeting today.
Thank you, Jeffrey. All right, well, that concludes our meeting.